Welcome everyone to session 4C, which is individual papers. And our theme for session 4C is Chinese textiles and dress. Thank you for joining us. We're really excited about the panel today. Every single one of our presenters are joining us from Asia. So we're really lucky to be able to have this group together for us today. My name is Lee Talbot, and I am curator of Textile Museum collections at the George Washington University Museum and the Textile Museum in Washington, D.C. And I'm also a board member of the Textile Society of America. My own research focuses particularly on East Asia, so I am particularly excited to be hosting this group today. My most recent exhibition at the Textile Museum was Vanishing Traditions, Textiles and Treasures from Southwest China, which looked at the textile arts of several minority cultures in that part of China. So the papers that we will be hearing about today, for the most part, will concentrate also on similar groups, the Hmong or the Miao and the Bai people. And like many minority peoples in China, these groups have a venerable textile heritage. But in the 21st century, they're negotiating significant changes in their cultures and their lifestyles. So today we'll have a chance to hear about this from several different perspectives. Just for a couple of notes, administrative notes, please put your questions in the Q&A button, which is on the bottom of your screen. You'll see Q&A. Please do indicate which speaker you are asking the question. So we'll go through all four of our presentations, and then we will, then I will guide them through the questions that you have asked. So we have a full program today. Let's get started. Our first speaker today is Chie Miyawaki, and she is an associate professor of the Anthropological Institute at Nanzan University in Nagoya, Japan. She's been conducting research within the Hmong or the Miao Society in Yunnan in China since 2007. Her main research topic is the transformation of Hmong dress during recent decades and the meaning of fashion and ethnic dress among the Hmong. Please welcome Chie Miyawaki.
I'm Chie Miyawaki from Nanzan University in Japan. I'm concerned with the meaning of dress in modern society, especially the program on so-called ethnic clothing. Today, I'd like to talk about the new style of ethnic clothing in Yunnan, China, and explore the meaning of tradition and fashion among the Hmong people. In Huazhan, in the southwest of Yunnan province, starting in the middle 2010s, many extravagant articles of clothing called New Style, Xinguang in Chinese, have been sold and become popular among local Hmong women, particularly younger ones. The new style clothing of recent years is made of colorful factory-made printed cloth. It is much too decorative with sewn-on beads decorations, lacy, billowing sleeves, narrow waist, and long skirt. Nowadays, almost all of the Hmong women in Huazhan have stopped making their own clothes and buy ready-made clothing in the local market. The reform and open door policies that began in 1978 brought dramatic economic growth to China, and a tide of capitalism has been engulfing the whole country, including even the ethnic minorities living in remote areas. For these minorities, it has become normal to wear Western rather than ethnic clothing. At the same time, ethnic clothing, now recognized as a cultural asset, has begun to draw more attention and to be seen as an object to be protected and preserved. So, how can ethnic clothing exist in contemporary China. So then, what is ethnic clothing? Previous research have defined it in two ways. First, it is understood as standing in contrast to everyday global dress and Western fashion systems. Second, the ethnic clothing shows ethnic identity. That is produced focusing on the difference between ethnic, and it is worn by the people who notice they are same group. But are more new style clothing clearly distinguishable from the Western fashion? And how does the new style clothing represent Hmong ethnic identity? Therefore, this presentation examines how Hmong new style clothing has emerged and what it means in contemporary China. Here is the outline of this presentation. Okay, I'd like to start talking about some background about Hmong clothing in Wenshan. In China, a multi-ethnic country, the clothing of ethnic minorities has been regarded as ethnic clothing, in contrast to the majority Han Chinese. Then, particularly after the 1980s, contrasts between the clothing of the majority Han and those of minorities become clearer. The minorities were encouraged to demonstrate their essential destinations, not to mark their own autonomous political borders, but to enrich the Chinese nation. Moreover, economic development brought tourist revenue through the rebalancing of cultural assets. Even in regions which minorities and cultural festivals created opportunities to showcase the clothing of minorities. Thus, there is a growing interest in minority clothing. As I mentioned, in China, the people who class themselves as Hmong are part of the 9 million strong Miao ethnic group. Miao people are widespread, living in mountainous regions in the area that includes Guizhou, Yunnan, Hunan, Sichuan, and Guangxi. Their languages, livelihoods, and customs differ from region to region. The Miao group can be divided into three self-designated groups, the Koshon, Mu, and Hmong. My research focused on the Hmong. The Hmong people who are living in Wenshan, the Hmong people who are living in Western Guizhou, Southeast Yunnan, and extended into Vietnam, Laos, Thailand. After the Vietnam War, many Hmong in Southeast Asia migrated to the United States, France, Australia, and other countries. The Hmong is the largest self-designated group of the Miao people, and is notable as an ethnic group that is distributed across national borders. My research site was Wenshan, which is located in Yunnan province near northern Vietnam. In Wenshan, there are 10 ethnic groups other than Han Chinese. Wenshan is the least visited area in Yunnan. This presentation will focus on women's clothing. Hmong women's clothing in Wenshan was generally coordinated and comprised of skirt, blouse, apron, belt, leggings, and head turbans. The skirt is made of indigo batik and cross-stitched hemp cloth with fine pleats. The blouse has a front section which lies open and has embroidery on the sleeve colors and front section. Making clothing is the work of the women in the family, and creating thread from hemp, weaving, dyeing, making batik, embroidering, and sewing have traditionally been considered a skill women have to learn. Sewing machine became more popular in the 1980s when factory-made yarns and manufactured cotton cloth became widely available. Dyeing and weaving therefore become no longer necessary. The availability of factory-made clothing spread. The young women in particular started to wear these ready-made fashion. They still, however, practice embroidery to these days, and preparing new clothing for the new year is still its great interest in females. In this section, I would like to focus on new style clothing from the middle 2010s. After the 1990s, Hmong ready-made clothing circulated in the local markets in Huazhan. The producers were mostly local Hmong women. Before 2008, however, the main customers were Hmong living outside China, especially in the United States. They got to know each other through American Hmong visiting Huazhan. After 2008, however, sales to the US went down. They explained the reason for this as being due to the collapse of Lehman Brothers. After this debt through, domestic consumption increased, increasing sales to Hmong in other provinces like Guizhou and Sichuan, as well as locally. Since the middle 2010s, new style clothing have been sold in Huazhan. I will describe the characteristics of the new style clothing. First, it is a ready-made clothing. Second, it is made of factory-made cloth, machine-made embroidery, lace, and beads decorations. Third, it was various forms and design. Finally, their forms and design change every year. So, why is the new style clothing so popular in Huazhan? In the following section, I'd like to consider it from both the producers and the consumers' perspectives. The producer of Hmong ready-made clothing is almost exclusively Hmong women. Since the 1990s, the number of people participating in this market has increased. I think there are two reasons behind this. First, Hmong women have fewer opportunities to earn wages in Huazhan, except for making and selling clothing. As the economy continues to develop, these women, both and raised in rural areas, also need to earn cash. In order to earn money, they participate in this business. Second, they want to work locally. Many of these women have gone to the coastal areas for migrant labor, but they have difficulty getting married or having children in migrant community, so they prefer to participate in this business. And the decorative new style can be sold at a high price, and it's easy to make a profit. For example, a full set of new style clothing with popular designs costs at least 1,000 Chinese yuan. In order to raise price, they use many more beads and added complexity to the manufacturing process. That's why a lot of producers started selling new style in competition with each other. Next, I will address this question from the perspectives of consumers, namely those who buy and wear the clothes. Until about a dozen years ago, it was normal for women living in rural villages to wear Hmong clothing on a daily basis. However, in conjunction with the change in lifestyle over that period, little more than a decade, a dress of younger generation has been changing rapidly. They frequently visit the towns and usually wear Western clothes almost exclusively. Since they are increasingly transitioning to urban styles of living, we have to ask why it is that they still wear Hmong clothing at all. Hmong women, however, continue to prepare new clothing for the New Year period year after year. The reason for that is that for the occasions such as a New Year, for going to the festival, for their own weddings, and for attending the wedding of relatives and friends, the rule of wearing new clothes has remained the norm. Women are expected to wear brand new clothes at the new year, and wearing a Hmong dress is the must for the bride at her wedding ceremony. What kind of clothing would be prepared for such an occasion? It must be brand new. And nowadays, consumers, regardless of age, want something new in their clothing. In particular, there is strong demand for designs that they have never seen or that others have ever worn. Nevertheless, the requirement for these occasions is wearing Hmong clothing without any specification as to what sort of Hmong dress. There are no obligations, for instance, to wear the Hmong's traditional hemp clothing or to wear embroidered clothing. Therefore, they want to wear the new style clothing. It can be said that the new style is facilitated by the needs of both producers and consumers. Now, I will move on to the next section and talk about the ethnicity of new style. So, can we say that the new style clothing is ethnic clothing? They wear it, as I said earlier, and as an opportunity for everyone to get together in the new year, like festival, wedding ceremonies. The important point here is that they wear a new style of clothing, being much aware of other Hmong women's attention and critique. This assessment is supported by the fact that women wear Western clothing when going to the school in their towns or when going to urban areas outside of Wenshan, where there are no Hmong. So, the new style of clothing must be Hmong style. They show their Hmong ethnic identity by wearing the new style. So, how is this Hmongness maintained? Generally, the ethnicity of ethnic clothing is found in handiwork and in the form of clothing. But Hmong people don't value being handmade. The women were pleased to be liberated from the heavy labor, like the growing, weaving, and dyeing of hemp. And they prepare to wear the clothing with excessive decorations and complex patterns. Likewise, forms of clothing don't have to be traditional. It has become more diverse. I asked some Hmong women what to give clothing Hmongness, which only exclude elusive answers. Thus, the Hmongness attributed to the new style is due to the differentiation from clothing of other minorities, not to particular design and patterns. Even the most unique design can still be categorized as Wenshan Hmong style, as long as it is clearly different from nearby minorities or the majority, and it created the worn by Hmong. It is not that the lifestyle of the Hmong have nothing to do with government policies or the economy. In Wenshan, where development of tourism has lagged behind other parts of the country, trend around the registration of intensive cultural assets since the 2000s, and the discovery of cultural assets such as ethnic display in museums have been conspicuous. The Hmong themselves have come to feel that their culture has value. Ethnic minorities has encouraged to wear ethnic clothing. On the other hand, there are still a few others in Wenshan who regarded Hmong clothes as a cultural resource. The Miao in Guizhou province have pushed for the development of tourism since the 1980s, and their clothing has attracted much attention. Traditionalism and authenticity are demanded by others in their clothing. Apart from this, Hmong clothing in Huazhan went mostly unrecognized. Hmong clothing does not unique tradition or authenticity from others. No unified image of Hmong clothing has been established. That's why I will consider that new styles are being promoted that are not bound by traditional production techniques and their forms. I'd like to conclude by making the following points. The main findings of this study are as follows. And it is clear from those points that in China, it is more important for the ethnic clothing to show the differentiation from other ethnic groups than the characteristics of the clothing itself. The case of the Hmong is interesting in that the transformation has not been a simple linear transition from traditional to Western dress. The younger generations, of course, choose Western dress as their daily clothing, but they also continue to wear Hmong clothing according to the norm, using industrial fabrics and other materials, switching from handmade to ready-made, and enjoying a great variety of design and forms. To the eyes of outsiders, the contemporary Hmong clothing typified by the new style may not appear to be traditional. Nevertheless, by accepting that the tradition in dress that we think of the normal are not what the Hmong people consider to be normal, it becomes possible to understand the transformation that has taken place. That's all I have to say. Thank you for your attention.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Miyawaki. That was wonderful. So we will actually continue on the subject of the Hmong or Miao people with our next talk, which will be by Sharon Tsang-de Lyster, who's joining us from Hong Kong. Sharon is an entrepreneur, a researcher, and curator in heritage, textiles, and design. She's the founder of Studio Narrative Made and also of the award-winning resource platform, the Textile Atlas, which champions intangible cultural heritage conservation and sustainable sourcing through documenting and network building for textile making practices. She pioneers brand development of the Billy, a textile upcycling mill in Hong Kong. And Sharon serves on the editorial board of Garland Magazine and local board of directors of Hope International. And she has a master's degree in museums, heritage, and material culture studies from the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. So Sharon, if you could please share your screen.
Thank you so much, Lee, for the intro. I realize it's rather long. And hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here among so many experts in this topic of Miao and Hmong already. So I'll just start my presentation now. So with an ethnographic research, this presentation is about the sampler of the Tian Mao embroidery, a mundane yet very important item for knowledge transmission of this intangible cultural heritage. The Miao, as many of you are familiar, is one of the biggest minority groups in China, known for their impressive costumes. Miao material cultures are usually displayed in exhibitions in a long series of textiles for aesthetic and technical appreciation. So here, there are two exhibitions of ethnic minority costumes. And this is one example from you. So the top one is from the world-class textile museum at the George Washington University, and the bottom one is from the Miaomei Intangible Cultural Heritage Museum in Kaili, Guizhou in China, the same province where a lot of the pieces are sourced from. While this display method achieves a stunning showcase for the variety of textiles from the featured ethnic group, it, however, can also sometimes generalize and romanticize the cultural narratives of the people group within the expanding modern Chinese nation. Also could reduce their over 4,000 years history of migration and evolution to the increasingly commercialized material made available to the collectors. So studies on the Miao is well established, but there are not always complete documentation on each of the more remote subgroups. So one of them is the so-called Tian Miao, which is what I want to focus on today. Here you can see Tian Miao women wearing their traditional costumes. And my investigation with this group explores how the embroidery samplers are critical elements for the cultural transmission and identity construction of this group. So the attention given to the often hidden sampler is an act of resisting the commodification of the craft and its culture, and paying respect to the female makers behind the craft. So last year, I went back to the places Gina Corrigan went 23 years ago, where she acquired the pieces of tin embroidery that is now part of the British Museum collection. She told me back then that this craft was regarded as a state secret. Villagers were very protective about the details of the sophisticated metallic needlework. Sorry, that's my cat on the side. So this slide shows more pieces in the collection. Here you can see in the bottom right some details of the visual records of the process of making. From field work, we can understand especially how the tin is applied onto the embroidery. From anchor stitching, which forms the design and pattern, dyeing the base cloth, and sometimes adding decorative embroidery as well, to preparing the metal sheet, cutting them into strips, and threading them and hooking them onto the anchor stitches. It takes about 3 years to complete a full costume set between seasonal farm work. I have here a small sample of the tin embroidery, if you can see it on my camera as well. So just to see the shining element and the intricacy, actually. So with the significant increase in contact with urban life and changes in heritage practices in the population, safeguarding this heritage craft became an urgent topic. I need to look at what enables the transmission of knowledge, and this led me to the samplers. First, a note about sampler. Samplers are models for imitation. They allow the needleworker to practice and learn new techniques and to record stitches and patterns as a point of reference for future work. Embroidery samplers are a form of notational system. Now, notations and manuals, often on paper, separate the procedure from practice and extract craft work from its geographical, social, and historical context. But samplers don't only record and instruct technical information. They exist to serve as substantial and tactile examples with embodied associated memories. So the Tian Miao is found in a cluster of hillside villages in Jinghe County, Guizhou Province. You can see from our photos, it is nearby the Qingshu River. In fact, only a few years ago, traveling by boat was the main transport to the village area. My research centers around a compact village called Jiano, where everyone has the same surname called Long. So across different publications, Miao embroidery samplers have been termed either all mother pattern or mother-child pattern. In the village, I asked how they would call the samplers. Some were initially reluctant to name it. Then one said it has no name. They simply called it Fawen, which means pattern. From no name to having multiple names, the naming of samplers revealed a deeper layer around Miao culture. Collector and educator Wang Zhenyi believed that samplers were called old mother pattern, but writers and researchers use mother-child pattern as it sounds better mannered. So while Han Chinese has had domination over national history and official records of minority groups, this case shows how cultural carriers are subject to practice their cultures definitely under influences of related authorities. So this led to the name of the craft itself, tin embroidery. It used to be made with silver, then tin, and now increasingly aluminum because it's cheaper and easier to work with. So some scholars think that it should not be named under the inconsistent material choices, but the crouching techniques. Concerning the passing of knowledge, I do agree that techniques are the most important element to maintain for practitioners. But then the crouching technique and the crouching of metal is only the final stage of the embroidery. And some traditional needlework did establish their definitions through material use, like the Shui people's hostile embroidery. We can analyze the naming of a collectible item. Collecting encourages rarity by creating scarcity. Then the word tin or hostile add exoticism to the items, promoting scarcity. Here, the changing names and material use highlights the fragility of craft knowledge, including the language in cultural transmission. Creating a sampler takes a mathematical mind, memory, eye strength, intentional body posture, and devotion to the culture, and most often the mothers. Despite sitting down, creating the embroidery is physically demanding work. The needle worker sits with her body curled up, constantly adjusting to allow the delicate finger work through skillful hand-eye coordination. This echoes the notion that craft is problem solving in action, where in our case, samplers usually are a store or carrier of knowledge, but craftsmen are owners of the movements. So the motifs are static and the movements are alive. A sampler records motifs and is a practicing tool. Its very existence embodies the craft knowledge. So Mui, one of the villagers, is also the owner of the blue sampler you see here, said that the stitches were done by what you see in the samplers were done by her grandmother and mother, and she can still add new pattern if she comes up with one. But not many people can create new patterns nowadays, because to do so, you need to know how to count, and when you break the rules, people can tell. That's what she say. So this embroidery requires calculations and concentration. Inventing new patterns then demand mathematical solutions and creativity based on the foundational principles. The samplers becomes a canvas for innovation, encouraging the living heritage to keep evolving. They embed individual or cross-generational efforts and sometimes personal inventive achievements. The same needleworker explains the motifs as similar to when you write. This is one character and that is another character. If you write it incorrectly, people can tell. So this builds on the idea that the Miao, a group without written languages, write their history onto the cloth. The sampler is made to be read, examined, and even interrogated from a technical perspective. Hers was a signpost of the inherent craft. And I have here with me a piece of sampler from the nearby region. And it contains some of the motifs that is also seen in the tin embroidery. As you can see, this is actually really clear to see all the stitches, the count thread stitches, and is in much bigger scale compared to the finished pieces. So when it comes to transmitting cultural knowledge through the physical piece, A visual of the stitches alone is not sufficient to explain how it is made. Needleworkers learned by making or the act of recreating, since skill is not a prerequisite but an outcome. And you can see in the picture when Mui was demonstrating how she used it, she literally was like pulling the samplers around and to make sure she sees the threads and the counting, see the stitches by counting the threads very precisely. This photo was taken from the oldest bridal jacket known from Tian Mao subgroup with similar motif embroidery as the current costumes, but not a single metallic embellishment was fixed on the stitches. It was believed to be over 270 years old and passed down 8 generations through the female lineage to Mui. Her son pointed out that the embroidery motifs and old songs and recorded history are related. This means that the motif logging samplers also document the people group's orally transmitted history. I will not go into the details around the common understanding of the Miao as a fleeting ethnic group and that they record history through textile making, but an example of what it is being, how it is being educated is the Miao Mei Intangible Cultural Heritage Museum in Kaili, Guizhou, where a clear explanation of Miao ethnic history is mapped out on display with an oversized statue of their believed ancestor Chie in the entrance. And the exhibition was wall after wall of Miao costumes. Its design, same as the practice mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, effectively unified the diverse cultural identities within the broader Miao complex narrative. So Moistan believed that the Tian Mao culture is their motifs and with their meanings passed down in old songs. He described the songs as long history books, and the only way to know it is to memorize it. The village's conformed culture is therefore what is in the mind and what was able to be memorized and recited. Meanwhile, the broader Miao oral tradition is also a group account created by many authors and memories. Therefore, while there is an agreed ethnic origin, there are many subgroups, histories, and identities that emerge through micronarratives. Each of them carries their accounts reflecting on their own characteristics and experience. Since there are evolution of tales throughout history, we should expect that the expression in heritage crafts also underwent changes. In other words, modern days samplers record the core motifs, recall and recite only the current understanding of the folklore of the present day versions. Yet here it is in the local market. A young man selling digital machine embroidered panels with the traditional motifs and occupied by his smartphone. Like many indigenous groups in developing nations, the intangible cultural heritage is lost primarily in its meaning and relevance to the modernizing lifestyles. Today, a large proportion of the village has moved either permanently or periodically to the cities. Young generations have grown up in state-run education with free time occupied by schoolwork instead of needlework. So making a set of costume out of machine embroidered panels would completely replace the need of samplers. Since both the skills of the needlework, the understanding of the motif formations, as well as the participation of the making will be eliminated. On the other hand, this confirms that samplers are purposed to hold and aid knowledge of cultural heritage. Their very existence and the need for them being an active part of life is the must for the transmission of this heritage craft technique. A quick note on the official intangible cultural heritage successors. In my research, I have also analyzed the politics related to the state-run system of these official narrators. They seem to be the ones who can make it out to the cities, have better communication skills, and also have clear desires or plans for their lives. Their audience is external. They too have economic pressures and are effectively taking up government jobs to promote their cultures. The interviewed official successors were able to talk at length about the samplers or the concept of general samplers. The samplers, as decoded by them, appear to be not only signifying heritage culture, but also collectible items with decent provenance. I believe that by paying attention to the mundane materials, the technical skillsmen, and by looking at the associated ideas of person, mind, value judgments, and social relations, the study of textile making knowledge transmission can offer wider perspectives to cultural and social identities in flux. In the context of minority groups in the global south, where craft making still constructs a significant part of their inherent identities, local and external interactions with the craft provides insights to the ongoing negotiation of cultural identities and social positionings. I leave you with this image from the village where a photo house or an eco-museum is being built. It is the villagers' latest initiative to record their way of life and the important role of the samplers and associated history. The villagers will remain the future narrators of the culture of Tianmao. Thank you very much.
So we'll continue with another look, another perspective on the Miao people. And our next speaker is Dr. Tomoko Torimaru. Dr. Torimaru received her PhD from Donghua University in Shanghai in 2004 in the field of history and technology of Chinese textiles. Her doctoral dissertation was called Study of the Origin, Development, and Dissemination of Warp Float, Warp Face Plain Weave in China, and her master's dissertation was Study on Techniques of Tablet Weaving and Textile Bands in China. She's conducted research primarily in southwestern China. She co-authored 2 publications with Dr. Sadai Torimaru on the material culture and techniques of the Miao people in China. And currently she's also researching the tablet weaving traditions in China and in other countries. So please welcome Dr. Tomoko Torimaru.
The Miao people of Guizhou province, China, use 2 different types of chain stitch. One is a standard chain stitch similar to Western style. The other one, which I termed ancient chain stitch, is distinctly different in execution and appearance, and is a technique that only Miao are practiced currently. Many examples of fine chain stitch embroidery have been excavated from archaeological sites in China. The extant embroideries clearly illustrate a unique expression of fine, fluid, curvilinear lines which are possible using ancient chain stitch. The relevance of this connection is highly significant in its implications of a shared history between the Miao people and ancient Chinese civilizations. In this presentation, I discuss the chain stitch embroidery technique and examines that the Miao certainly influenced ancient Chinese embroidery and had a significant presence in the Chu state during the Warring States period. This map shows the location of Guizhou province. Guizhou province is my field research place. Today, I will be only talking about chain stitch and the ancient chain stitch. So if you are interested in other techniques, please check the website of Throw Fiber Studio or contact to Yoshiko Wada. I think you all know just the standard chain stitch. I learned about ancient chain stitch in my field research. I did not know it before. The ancient chain stitch appearance is characterized by narrower chain loops and more influid lines. Tension is more consistent. If you are not enough careful when you stitch chain stitch, the tension on the left and right of the loops will not be even. So like this. This is an example of a work using chain stitch. The edge of the satin stitch is stitched by the chain stitch. It used on the part of shoulder. Here is an example of ancient chain stitch. The ancient chain stitch is used on the back part of the neck. So this is the example of the ancient chain stitch. This is another example of ancient chain stitch. Her headband is embroidered with ancient chain stitch and then dyed very dark color. So let's watch the video for a moment, but the video is a little bit noisy.
你给姐姐好啊，那给姐背起背上了啊，背起的好哎。你身上没背这个呗，生活吃。
你身体好了哈？
好。
身体好，气势吹的人啊。
好。对，是那这个。
以前做不到了哈，你不行。
不尽量做，我们不尽量做，就只是光。尽量直接吧。
哦。但是他们又不会抓过哈，他们。
So these are a comparison of chain stitch and ancient chain stitch. Looking at the back side, they are same. Therefore, sometimes it is difficult to judge which stitch it was used, even though if you check at both front and back side. So next, let's take a look some examples of chain stitch at the ancient times. This picture shows a silk cloth that had been stuck to a lump of soil, dating back to the Western Zhou period. The red circle mark shows the place where it was excavated. This is an example of the Warring States period. You can see fine, fluid, curvilinear lines. I think these were stitched by ancient chain stitch. The pink circle mark shows the place where it was excavated. So during the Western Zhou period and Warring States period, the predominant design was the animal patterns, like the dragon, phoenix, which was based on mystical creatures. So this is an example of the Western Han period. All these are also embroidered with chain stitch. The dark green circle mark shows the place where they were excavated. This is another example of the Western Han period. From this Mawandui No. 1 tomb, 40 pieces of chain stitch clothes were excavated. The blue circle mark showed the place where they were excavated. Decorative art from the Western and Eastern Han period and Sixth Dynasty period reflects a strong belief in Qi, viewed as the vital force of life or energy flow. Qi can be described as the auxiliary substance of which everything is composed of. This is a map showing the migration of Miao people based on the research of some scholars so far. In ancient time, the Miao were upside of the Yellow River. So here is the Yellow River. After that, they crossed the Yellow River and the Yangtze River, continued southward, and arrived in Guizhou province. You can see that the time of migration of the Miao and the location of those tombs almost overlap. When the Sui and Tang periods came, a new style of symbolic motif grew in popularity, such as the elegant peony, Tang grass pattern, blossoms, and so on. These motifs seemed more grounded than the previous favorite Chie style, with its mystical creatures and swirling patterns. Even dragons were depicted as more earthbound and otherworldly. Hence, embroidery stitches changed to suit the new expression. The chain stitch disappeared from the mainstream, giving over to the satin stitch, couching stitch, and so on. Here is the embroidery example of Tang period. It was found from underground palace of Famen Temple. The patterns made by the couching stitch. All these are also from the Famen Temple. So this is also from the Famen Temple, but it's a chain stitch. In the Tang period, there may still be a few chain stitches left. I have already shown this photo to you. This is trace of the chain stitch of the Western Zhou period. The Famen Temple and the Luzhazhuang tomb are only 90 kilometers apart. These prove a long history of chain stitch in this region, this area. So this is a embroidery example of Qin dynasty. Today, of the four dominant artistic style of Chinese embroidery, Su embroidery, Xiang embroidery, Shu embroidery, and Guan embroidery, all exclusively use only the chain stitch, only the satin stitch. So once again, let's take a look at the chain stitch of the Warring States period. It's on display at the Jinzhou Museum, Hubei Province, China. Reproduction is also on display at the museum. So this is the original one, and this is a reproduction. I haven't asked the museum which chain stitch was used for this reproduction, but I found when I found some place, the one side of the loop pulled, like not even. This suggests that they used the standard chain stitch. This is the original one again. This is another example of the Warring States period. It's a mirror back. So you can see narrower chain loops and more fluid lines. I think it was used the ancient chain stitch. I will talk a little bit about chain stitch in education. This photo shows the students stitching for the reproduct project of Western Han costume at the Beijing Institute of Fashion Technology. So they made it. This is the reproduction. So they use just standard chain stitch. They prepared very well. Also use the embroidery frame. Students were concentrated on their work and well done. Very nice. So unfortunately, I haven't made any reproduction using ancient chain stitch. This is a dress we made in my teaching class in the Hong Kong Polytechnic University to express our gratitude to our ancestors. More than 80 students took part in their own designs showed with ancient chain stitch. So the students only used the needle and threads. I think they did very good job. All students use ancient chain stitch. No, they didn't use standard chain stitch. At the present time, Miao is just one of 55 minority groups in China. However, the result of my research on Miao embroidery, in particularly my findings on ancient chain stitch and its identifiable appearance in actual dated relics from ancient Chinese culture, is strong evidence of a close historical connection between the Miao and ancient civilizations in China. The Miao certainly influenced ancient Chinese embroidery and had a significant presence in the Chu state during the Warring States period. The Chu state was around this area. Thank you so much for your attention.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Torimaru, for that look at the chain stitch. And so for our final presentation today, we'll be hearing from Jory Johnson. Jory Johnson is a textile artist who studied in the USA and Finland and directs the Jorie textile studio in Kyoto, producing felt for our modern nomadic times. She's the author of 2 felt making books, and her work has appeared in the SDA Journal and Fiber Art Now. A fellow at the Imperial Household Agency, NADA. She's been studying their Tang Dynasty floral pattern felts, which you can read about in Holly issue 196. She's been selected for exhibitions such as Artwear, Fashion, and Anti-Fashion, Hats, and an anthology by Stephen Jones, and Fashioning Felt. And her work is found in institutions including the MFA Boston. So now let us welcome Jory Johnson.
Hello, Lee. Thank you to the TSA committee and all of you in the audience today. It's a pleasure to be greeting you here from Kyoto. I'm going to have some help with Lee as far as advancing the slides due to some technical difficulties at the moment, but please bear with us. Slide 2, please. My interest in these red and white felts, as I referred to them for years, was of course related to their being such thin and handmade felt. Also, the mysterious technique in which the traditional design were applied. Were they stenciled or printed? Was it resist dyed? The surface of the felt is so smooth and the lines so straight. I repeatedly asked colleagues and dealers, and no one had a confident answer for me. 3. Masters of red and white. Luckily, after more than 25 years of waiting, I was introduced to a small village in southwest China, Yunnan province, the area of Dali, where the traditional technique of paste resist application on felt called Huazhan was still being produced. Zhan meaning felt and Hua referring to paste. 4. The masters He and Yang, who worked with me, were 2nd and 3rd generation, following family members' footsteps. I was also impressed with the minority felting equipment, some of which I had never seen before, even in my 30 plus years in the field of felt making. 5. In their late teens, both men not only worked in their village workshops, but I was told accompanied their father or uncle on foot to various routes in northwest Yunnan and into neighboring Tibet. These wandering felters stayed away between 3 to 6 months on the road, with their equipment on their backs, housed and employed by local communities with annual wool sources to be used in supplying households with bed pads, capes, and hats. 6. Wool preparation, felting, and dyeing equipment. 7. My trip involved many languages, and it seems the Bai language is only spoken using the Han language as the official written language. Adding to this, various sheep breed names in a foreign dialect allow me to just generally say I found the wool to be a typical type, generally used for rugs, but available in a variety of qualities and finenesses. 8. Each master chose quality according to his means and circumstances. Different wool required different finishing techniques in preparation for the paste application. The wool with less guard hair content, i.e. better quality, was faster to work and finish. 9. It was typical carpet wool such as fat-tailed breed, but not exclusively, and nothing you would want to wrap around your neck. Sometimes also used for hats, bags, and cloaks, and cushions and household items. Purchased in several natural colors, the wool was separated and the white used for the traditional Huazhan felt. You can always tell quality, especially when working exclusively in white felt. Is it clean of vegetable matter? Is it clean of guard hair? Did they prepare it well before starting? 10. Notice the 2 types of bows and various lengths, the heavy dumbbell-shaped striking tool and well-used bamboo mat for rolling the wool into felt. 11. These heavy wooden tang gon referring to bows, carding bows, similar to what I've also seen in Hungary for hat makers, have thick cowhide cord and were once the only means of preparing the greasy wool after hand picking it clean of waste. Nowadays, small electric-powered or gas-powered separating machines are run by the ladies or wives of the workshops, and the bows, more a symbol of the family profession and history. 12, I hope to present you with the demonstration video. And I'm not sure those of you can hear the noise, but the bows are suspended with a cord and have a support system of a curved bamboo rod. So they're very heavy and you need some kind of suspension for that. Thank you. 13. Now the use of the lighter bowl called pugong with a bamboo cord, this time of about 10 millimeters in width, is for refluffing and coaxing the wool into the desired position and shape of the work. Now I have 2 short film clips also that follow, number 14 and number 15, but unfortunately video's not translating for us today. So it's hard to see here, but the bamboo cord is helping to fluff, and he's holding it with the right hand. And then he flips the bow around and then continues to work it in another direction. So using both sides, just flipping over the bow. And the length of the bow also is in relationship to the project that they're producing, so that they're able to spread the wool carefully over wider or narrower work. 15. Now, again, sorry about the video, but shaping the edges. And then once the wool is in position, he'll also use the bow again to press the excess air out of the pile of wool. 16. A quick close-up at the strong bamboo mats. Notice the discontinuous nylon packing tape warps spread 20 to 22 centimeters apart. This construction gives strength, yet spongy flexibility to the mat, thus exerting good agitation. The short warp strings allow for ease in repairing, especially smaller sections at a time. This is, I feel, a kind of genius work, and I had the opportunity to participate in repairing, to helping the masters with their mats. 17. These mats are quite large and are generally stabilized at the far end with several heavy weights. So the front section is rolled up and left untied, and as you see here, rolled by foot. The next 18 is another video demonstrating this kind of dance with the mats. Unfortunately, we hope to have it up on the website later. Master Hay here is preparing the shape and rolling without even any rod, but just rolling directly up in the mat. And soon his wife comes in and takes over, enjoys being filmed, but is very adept with her foot to roll the mat. And in that process, the wool is compressed and controlled in shape and size. 19. Yes, here next, I just want to briefly show a typical dye studio of, in this case, of Master Yang. The wok is about 125 centimeter in diameter. You can see it's simply heated by wood, and then it's easily drained to the side with access of water through a hose running just behind the wok. Master Hay, on the other hand, had no permanent dye area, but as necessary, prepared a setup in somewhat the same manner, yet in the middle of his house's courtyard. 20. Here are some examples of the mysterious egg-shaped tools called wabi used to apply the paste. Now, I've never seen this before, closer to socks, mending equipment, but depending on the size, the surface area of the egg, more paste can be collected for use in applying it to a wider area. So you'll find narrower and wider, generally only hand-carved egg shapes, such as these with a rounded metal nail through the bottom, from which the paste is applied. 21. And finally, the mysterious paste, an elementary formula of white wheat flour and water, thinned to the consistency of crepe batter and nothing more. 22. Huazhan auspicious designs for bench and bed. 23. Primarily produced in red and white, the most auspicious colors for the start of a young couple's marriage. Wishes of fertility, wealth, and longevity were expressed through the motifs with some free-form flora and geometric border bands to complete the composition. 24. double size and single widths for bed and bench, as not only do they deliver padding, but warmth as well. Now this image also reveals the contemporary neutral and natural color products that the current generation apparently prefer and in a sense are quite nondescript. It could be objects that were found in Europe or America or Australia. So it would be a pity to lose the traditional motifs to such a great extent as we see in these new works. 25. This is a classic, lovely double bird image which fills the long rectangular felt shape well. 26. Underneath that is this double phoenix and floral bench felt or single bed pad. 27. An older mid-1950s example shows more paste application to produce a wider white edging and a bolder design. This example comes from a third family workshop which once existed in the same village, a peony and phoenix design. Probably not ordered as a wedding bed pad, the choice of green was perhaps already a modern alternative 70 years ago. 28. Here's a nice example for us as we can read the number 86 followed by the character for the year in Chinese to the right of the deer's head. This was the year of the birth of Master Hei's son, and for the occasion he created this artistic work. 29. In contrast, here is a fresh 219 work in black and white by the Young Workshop. 30. The felt process in brief. 31. Just a reminder, these felters use only somewhat greasy, unwashed wool. So the carding and fluffing stage is imperative to good quality felt, good quality, dense, fulled felt. 32. The use of the lighter bow for controlling the placement of the wool was the first time that I'd ever witnessed the tool in action. 33. The wool is wetted with only hot water and rolled inside the flexible mat until such condition as the support of the mat is no longer needed. Then the felter switches to forearm pressure and further rolls the rug, for example, on a tabletop. 34. This was a special order I made to observe how they might prepare a multi-layered edge detail, which I found in older, finer examples. Excuse me. It's not one now that's commonly executed. Continued pressure by leg rolling on the concrete floor tightens the felt further. 35. Here you can see emphasis on quality and shape control, and by stretching the felt along the ruler, he's being very concerned about the proper squareness of the felt. The surface in the right slide is then scraped while continuing to rinse with water. The next 36 is a video also, sorry. And anyways, you get to see this very rough blade. It's actually a blade that was used for pipe, rotary saw pipe cutting, and it's just split in half. So it's a sandy, rough surface to scrape, particularly the guard hairs from the surface to create a very flat, smooth surface to apply, of course, the paste to. 37. Of course, you have to rinse and hang the work to thoroughly dry it in preparation for the even application of the liquid paste. 38. Design, layout, paste, application, and process. 39. Simply with a chunk of charcoal, we draw out the border delineation and sketch in the design. 40. Mix the wheat paste consistently while applying it, and you hold the wabi tool in an absolute upright position, or else paste will drip off easily. You want to also tap the paste a second or third time into the surface of the felt to ensure good reservation of design. 41, please, is a video of Master Yang tapping into the surface. And what you'll see here also is that he's using now a condiment plastic bottle applicator. So they are moving in another direction. This gives more faster possibilities for cleaner ensuring the design paste is applied well. 42. Allow the paste to dry completely to ensure the best resist during the subsequent dyeing stage. 43. Now, rather than directly dyeing the work, it is first boiled in water. When the white dried paste turns to a translucent cloudy white, it is then ready to dye. 44. The work is briefly removed from the wok. Acid dye is mixed in, followed by, in this case, some citric acid crystals. After mixing the dye bath well, the felt is replaced and continues to cook until a desired depth of color is achieved. 45. Rinse the work immediately and using a semi-sharp chopping knife. And by applying good pressure, the surface is scraped free of areas of residual paste. And using your fingertips over the surface, you can check to see if there's any residual paste still on the surface. And this is repeatedly scraped and then rinsed again. 46. So obviously when the surface is free of paste, then the rug is finally rinsed well and left to thoroughly dry. 47. More examples of red and white Huazhan paste resist, but where are they from? 48, please. I'm going to quickly finish up with 7 examples of older, unclassified works, which I've seen or own or searched for on the internet. Perhaps someone of you can offer more detailed information, and this would be more than welcomed. Now, this work was at first, to my mind, a sample or practice piece. Look how free-flowing it is. Perhaps a saddle blanket after some years of thought, but because both sides, of course, are not necessarily seen at the same time when it's on the horse's back. But now I believe it's another example of such a Huazhan red and white paste resist, and most likely a bench cover or bed pad. 49. This is the most modern, excuse me, three-color work to date, which I've seen. And when I first saw it, I thought, well, it must be a clamp resist. It's quite large, size of a blanket. And here you can see the front and back and how the paste slightly penetrates to the back of the felt. 50. Now this is a quite large, what I would put in quotes, wall hanging, or at least that is what's used for in this house to help celebrate New Year's. And here you see the absolute clean lines and near mirror image design as well. So this was also analyzed as being dyed with sapon wood and therefore probably late 19th or early 20th century work. But I quite often show this to people, and how carefully they cut a form to, you know, dye this or screen this or whatever. So it's quite impressive, the extent to the technique that's possible with this Hubei egg-shaped tool. 51, please. And now the last four examples are borrowed with respect, great respect from the internet resources, but they appear with little information, although mostly are suggested as being Tibetan. Deer and floral motif with quite complicated geometric border. I think we can kind of follow patterns with these borders to give clues as to possible areas of their production. 52. Here again, the same border, and we can enjoy variations in design and detail. All are classified simply from, in my mind, as these red and white paste resist felts. Beautifully balanced and fine detail. And you could just see a minimal, around the edging here, that it could be a 3-layered edge, as I had requested of Master Yang and Master He to practice and show me. 53. The most interesting two double dragons, mirror images, quite a lot of auspicious motifs with the writing pens and mirrors and gems. So again, this is imagery for auspiciousness. 54. Now, I think we must be reminded that acquiring a work in a country doesn't necessarily clarify the ethnic pattern or artisan minority that produced the original work. And as I stated at the beginning, the two masters, He and Yang, at a very young age, were walking for months in various villages in China and parts of Tibet in order to make their family's livelihood, of which I hope will continue with the next generation. 55. Thank you very much, and especially to Lee for controlling my program for me.
All right, thank you very much, Jory. That was fascinating and really great images. So if the other speakers could show their video and unmute themselves, let's look at some of the questions. I know that some of our speakers have been very busy answering some of these questions, typing them in, which is great. We may repeat some of those just for some of the people who were not present or weren't reading that, and they might also be interested as well. So let's see. So the first one, I'm just going to go in order, and I'm looking at the question and answer. There are a couple of open ones, and so this one is for Sharon. And it says, do you have practical advice for how to reconnect modern Miao scholars and artisans with a large collection of embroidery and weaving samplers from across Guizhou province that are currently in the USA?
So I'm not an expert in the collections in the USA, but I do think, there are increasingly more mainland Chinese-based scholars and researchers who are interested in these textile now. So maybe one way, if possible, is to bring some of these materials back to the villages where proximity of where those might be from, and ask them and show the villagers what they can tell us. From my experience in just some of the places that I've been to, actually bringing materials back or even pictures back would be very, very, very interesting to show, what they know about it or what they think things would be, and whether they can tell the history of certain families or villagers or people that they might know. And even some of them might be assumptions, but just bringing some of those information together.
Yeah. Yes, that's when I was researching Vanishing Traditions, it all came from one collection, from the B. Roberts collection. And I had photographs of everything. And so I spent a month in Guizhou, and I went to all the villages that I thought these pieces were from and showed the people photographs and just asked for their reactions. Does this really look like it's from your village? What do these mean? And even had them, teach me some of the techniques if they could. But I must say that they were very cagey in Jianhe about 10 embroidery. They didn't and I'm surprised they taught you, because that was something that at least I understood was they considered it to be very, very, very private and a secret.
Yeah. Well, I didn't get to learn it. It's way too small for me to see. But I was very grateful that through some connection that's in my generation, so I was introduced as friends of the family to go into the village, and I got to see a little bit more. But if I was to pick up the skills, I wouldn't even dare.
Yeah. And so a couple of more questions for you. So when do they wear metal embroidery? Is it reserved for special occasions?
So as far as I know, they, like many villages of different minority groups, they used to wear this as everyday clothing. And for the more elaborate versions or layerings, of course, they would wear it on special occasions, whether it is, around the New Year's and festivals like that, weddings or various celebrations. From this particular case, I gather that because they used to farm their own cotton as well, around up to 30 years ago, they would produce the base cloth themselves, and the embroideries would be a lot bigger because the nature, if you look at, the size of this sampler, let me try to show it here. Compared to this machine-made base cloth next to it, the stitching is of completely different size. So they've gone smaller and smaller over the past few decades. And by the time I get to see it in some of the pictures that I was showing, they're just so tiny. It's even smaller than these ones. So I didn't see the point of why they have to size it like that. But really, when they used to have hand-spun cotton as their base cloth, even for the costume, I think it was more, it's more rough. And so they also use it as everyday clothing. And when I went to the market, I still see elderly who was wearing it, but have a million things that's on their back as well. So it's not a costume that is only reserved for the best days. Is an everyday dress.
Okay, and one more for you, and you mentioned it briefly, but let's just reiterate. What are the metal threads made from?
So actually is strips of tin or aluminium, and apparently it used to be steel fur, so it's actually not so much of a thread. It's they if you don't mind, can I share my screen again to show you one picture?
Sure. Well, an embroiderer that I talked to said that she used toothpaste tubes. as
Toothpaste what?
Oh,
Yeah, toothpaste tin. I heard of that as well. So what, if you can see the second image here, can you see my screen? Yeah, they were actually melting whatever material, so aluminium tin and from toothpaste, like packaging, all sort of packaging, melting it in a big wok. And by splashing it down to a flat layer, it forms, and when it cools down, forms a sheet of tin or aluminium. And then in the next photo here, they were cutting it into strips, and that is being thread into the anchor stitch here. I hope it shows okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes. Thanks for clarifying that. It's just an amazingly difficult technique. It was one that's just difficult for me to wrap my head around exactly how they came up with that and maintained it. So thanks. So I have a question for Jory. Do you know how long have the Bai felted, and who might they have learned the technique from?
I have to say that for 25 years, I was seeking answers, and only since a year ago did I get anywhere with this. So I would be running now to get as much information as possible as I can. I couldn't tell you. My impression was they're the ones who were teaching everybody in the area, but
Okay.
I would hope to have by next conference much more information. And as I said, welcome from anybody who has more.
Yeah, okay. And another question, do they use only two colors? Is that just the way it is, that there's the dye and then there's the felt color?
Yeah, recently they've started to add acid dye to the paste resist, which then gives them a third or fourth color if they're applying directly with the dye. So traditionally, the well-made white felt base, very clean. Again, you could pick quality just by looking at the white base, the artisanship of the producer, and then the paste and red for auspiciousness, but as I showed, some black, some green, and so on. So generally the two pattern, positive, negative, in a sense, black and white or red and white patterns are the most traditional, but now they're getting very colorful.
Okay. And so Janice Arnold has a question. She says, Jory, wonderful presentation. Given the paste penetration you showed with the felt in reverse, and given the obvious density of these pieces, how do you think the paste was removed that was embedded in the fibers?
Okay, first, because the surface is so smooth, that was what impressed me in the beginning. And then I thought, of course, stenciling or printing. And then we found the tool, practiced the application, and if it's well scraped with this chopping knife blade, it disappears. I was always touching the surfaces of any of the antique pieces I saw in Japan, here at the last stop of the Silk Road, yet nobody had answers for this. And here, of course, it's a rice resist paste that's used. So rice or wheat, that was interesting. But I don't know, as it's washed or as it's used, I never found any residual color, so paste. So it got inside, but apparently it came when it was scraped off. Okay.
And so a related question, it says, did you say the paste resists flour, water? And if so, doesn't it dissolve when placed in hot water?
I wanted to give this quick presentation, because after being involved with felt for so many years, I'm still amazed by the equipment, by the use of the dirty, greasy wool to begin with, and also the point about the paste. It's attached. I think I've seen it also almost immediately boiled and then dyed, but apparently for absolute, security, if it's dried well and then it's boiled like grandma's pasta, I don't know, it hardens enough, and then it seems to maintain that resist. So it's a miracle. Honestly, I have some here at the house. It's a typical gyoza, Chinese, hot bun, white, well-refined flour and water. And honestly, the consistency appears just as if it was a French crepe. So it's an international miracle, I guess.
Okay. And then one more question for you. Does the paste cling to the outside of the egg applicator, or is there an inner cavity to hold the paste?
Yeah, sorry, I have some eggs in the next room. I'll run and get them and bring them back when you speak to somebody else. No, that's sort of the point. I saw them in various circumferences and various diameters so that it would cling. I think this is also ingenious. I just love how the artisan develops tools for their needs. So the wider, offers more surface area. So when you dip in the paste, it runs down through the rounded nail, and slowly runs out. So then you go and redip it again. So there's nothing on the inside. That's exactly what I thought in the beginning. How's this going? I mean, actually, we tried here in Japan before going to work with the masters. I tried rulers. I tried very stiff Japanese hair brushes and so on. And we got some results with some other materials like a kakishibu and so on. But with this very liquidy paste, this egg application is another genius technique.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. All right. So I have a couple of questions for Dr. Torimaru. So someone was asking for the chain stitch. Some of the threads look metallic, like they're made of metal. Can you tell us what the materials are that were used for the chain stitch? Is it only silk, or are there metallic threads?
I think only silk.
Okay.
In ancient time, right?
Yeah.
Ancient Miao.
Today, do they use metallic threads?
That for the chain stitch?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No. So okay. So another question for you, Dr. Torimaru. When was the first time that Dr. Sadae Torimaru made field trips to Guizhou? And at that time, did most women wear ethnic costumes? And mostly men wore the Mao style or Han style clothing?
My Sadae, the first visit to Guizhou is in 1985. Sadae went. What's
okay,
the first?
1985. Okay, yeah.
1985. Then I don't know because I didn't go there with her, but I think at that time already. I think many women still wearing the traditional costume, but not many men wear their traditional costume.
Okay.
Not like the Vietnam. I think the Hmong in Vietnam, they are still wearing their traditional costume every day. But in China, Miao in China, most of them don't wear their traditional costume in their everyday life.
Okay.
already.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. So actually, I have a question for Dr. Miyawaki. So you said that that the new style changed every year. So is it similar to sort of our fashion sense in that if a girl wears last year's clothing, then she's embarrassed and she won't wear it? Like you have to change every year to keep up with fashion? Or is it just that there are new designs that come out every year to make it more interesting and exciting?
Thank you for your question. I think in the market, year after year, the design and style change rapidly, and girls, and also want young girls also want to wear the another new one. Is it correct for your question?
Yeah, I think so. But do they feel like, for example, in many modern cultures, like a young girl will feel embarrassed if she doesn't have the new style of that year, because fashion's always changing, and we often judge people by their fashion. I mean, do you find that to be the case there?
Yeah, if one girl don't wear the new style or new fashion in this year, she feel very ashamed for everyone to wear old style.
Yeah. Okay. So it is very much like a fashion sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. There's another question. Yoshiko has a question for Jory. So the paste is raw when applied and dried, and when cooked, it binds to the woolen fiber. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a hi Yoshiko, everybody. Yeah, I went to pick up quickly this type of. Now you might see that this has a plastic handle, but there's no way that it gets inside. It's all and you can see different. Whoops, on the table. Different widths and lengths of it. So the idea is to dip it into this crepe-like batter. That's all it is, and then it coats the egg and then slowly runs down in a way like a traditional brush would in that sense, but on the outside of this. And the batter is simply that, and it dries well. If it dries well, and if it's boiled not long enough. Longer than to see the white turn a little bit translucent color. That somehow sets it in and connects it better, make it better contact with the wool felt, and then it's dyed immediately. And then it's softening during the dyeing process, so it scrapes out like a paste. I think you might have seen it, the residual paste being collected as they were working on it. I don't know how it's going to work with these videos finally on the TSA site, but hopefully we can get those there somehow.
Yes, we'll try to get the videos in the final version, and so our viewers now can come back when we post these online and see the full videos. I have a couple of just comments, not really questions, but they're very interesting, from Karthika Ardene, who's from India. And so she had a couple of comments for you, Jory. And so she says, we have similar processes in India. The felts are called nandas. And those bows look like the ones that wandering cotton fluffers used when they came to fluff up our quilts.
Yeah, well, here at the end of the Silk Road in Nagasaki, 200 years ago, there was a short Chinese workshop for about 16 months, and they have a wooden bow in their collection, which they obviously thought it was for cotton. So I think it's cotton and wool works for the same, with the same equipment. And I honestly, in 1980s, I saw it in Hungary being used by hat makers there. So that just shows you the distances east and west that equipment and artisans travel along the Silk Road. I find that fascinating.
Yeah. And we have one last question. It's for you, Jory, and it says, is the dried paste immersed during the cooking process, or is it steamed?
Absolutely in the pot. Sorry, I could have talked about this for 2 hours, even though I'm just starting the research and also practice myself. So it's immersed in. I mean, pasta just keeps coming to my mind here that it's not steamed on the surface. It's carefully held under the water until it again becomes translucent, and then at that point, apparently, immediately ready to be dyed. Yep. And the process then is important to scrape it off as it starts to soften, I guess. Yeah.
Right. All right. Thank you. And so that's all the questions we have, and it looks like we're finishing exactly on time. I want to thank all of our panelists for being here. For all of you, you're in East Asia, and so this was a very early morning for all of you, very early to get up and have to do a presentation like this. So we really appreciate your doing that, and we appreciate your sharing all of your wonderful research and experience with our audience at TSA. So thanks again to the audience. Thanks to the panelists. I hope that you will join us in half an hour. We will be showing our movie for tonight, which is Night in the USA. And then we will hope to see you all tomorrow for day 2 of our Biennial Symposium. Thanks, everyone.